Hello again. Welcome to another podcast episode on Talk Architecture, and I'm your host, Naziaty Muhammad Yaacob. Continuing on part 2 of the idea of adaptability. Taking off from the last we talked about it, there is a relationship between visualization and the idea of adaptability. Now, we took two disciplines. One is mental health balance, or mental health per se, psychological or cognition. And then on the other side, we have architecture, or the practice of architecture, or the education of the architect. So there's two things. We look into these two contexts and background and anything to do with it in the understanding that there is a relationship between adaptability and visualization. Obviously, in architecture education and architectural practice, the visualization techniques, or the attempt to visualize an idea or a sketch or a scheme, is paramount in order for the profession to survive, with the fact that whether you need architecture at all. But of course, other disciplines also can do that. And there's a question of whether it's a good design or not good design, or just design, or it could be a better design. And innovation that has to do with a higher knowledge and comprehension of the difficulties in integrating all the elements that make architecture so fascinating. And taking it to another level, we have also deeply engaged with universal design and accessibility, which is kind of a specialized thing and yet something fundamental. But a little bit further down the road would be sensorial experiences and sensory design, and maybe linked to phenomenological endeavors of the phenomenology. So we shall look at that later. Go back to actually thinking about the idea of visualization and adaptability in the context of a human being and cognition, and in the whole pursuit of mental health balance for architects or anyone at all, any human being at all. So the idea that I proposed, the idea that earlier, in order to be much more consistent or focus on your goals and dreams, you actually sketch it out. And the best way is a three-dimensional sketch of a scene that you want to happen, like in terms of relationship or romantic relationship, to be precise, where you could imagine you're exchanging vows in a religious setting or in a wedding situation with your romantic partner. And details like chandeliers or tables and the coverings on the tables and the flowers and the smell of the flowers. I mean, every sensorial thing that you can think of could be obtained, could be idealized. And obviously, in that context, when people arrange for their wedding banquet and event to happen, those little details meant a lot. Even the song that is being played during the wedding and so on. So you actually could sketch it out in your mind exactly what you want to happen. The point is that how you sketch out in your mind could be a very fixed ideal and not flexible, you know what I mean? And if you had a discussion with your beloved about your wedding, the other person, your partner, could say, no, I don't want that sort of wedding. I want a wedding that's very laid back and at the beach with the sunset, and we have a barbecue and very simple one and so on. So you see, the flexibility and adaptability of another human being to that situation that could change is very much something that is kind of like what humans do, of course, and could be an important factor in survival. For example, that your future spouse or future partner would consider you to be a good mate, for that matter, when you are flexible and adaptable to change. So why can't that be in architecture? Why can't architecture, if it is a collaboration between the architect, the designer, and the client, or the collaborator that funds, or the thinking about the user, how the users use the building, or how the future-proofing the building would entail being much more adaptable, and thinking about adaptability as part of the concept or the idea, central idea to the whole endeavor of designing architecture. So you see the similarities between mental health balance and the idea of that, how one would pursue visualization and adaptability with that of architecture practice or architecture education. So needless to say, in architecture education, why can't we be much more flexible in our teaching course, in the students understanding what architecture is about, and the idea of adaptability could be something that is being explored more. Well, we have, in the previous courses that I've engaged with, kind of be fixated about certain grandmasters like Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, Mies van der Rohe, Walter Gropius, and many others, who we sort of like teach to our students. These are the grandmasters, or these are the masters of architecture, which have these beliefs, and you should strive for the principles that they have explored and in their architecture. And whether you're a Miesian person or a Yaacob person, or you idolize one of them, or and so on, is something that is kind of like quite commonly happen in architecture schools. Like learning about architecture theory and history of architecture through the eyes and precedents of these models, these role models, human beings, and also the architecture that they design. So it's kind of a common way to study architecture. Is that a good thing or not? I mean, I've been teaching that for many, many years, and then suddenly I realized maybe we lack of exposure to different architects that could be much more interesting. Towards the end of my career as an academic that teach design theory, we started investigating other architecture principles and ideas from architects, including those with phenomenological bent or theory. And also introducing to non-architects as well, vernacular buildings, how vernacular buildings emerge and developed over the years, buildings that are designed and built by the non-architects, which is 80% of the population, by the way. Or 80% of the, not 80% of the population, sorry, 80% of the built form that has been built throughout the ages, because those that we focus on by the grandmasters and star architects make up of the 20%, but the 80% is by non-architects. Non-architects include other professionals or contractors, or a contractual a situation where you do not need architects to be involved with the building of something. So are they adaptable as well? Do these non-architect building? But we're focusing on vernacular architecture per se. And I was thinking along the lines of traditional architecture. In my country, such buildings are being made in a certain way that traditionally people sit on the floors and it's raised by timber stilts. The whole thing is in timber. And the wall is sort of permeable in a way with very low hanging eaves that won't allow for rain to come in, but allow for cool breeze to come in, and semi-permeable or quite permeable in a sense that even insects can come in. But the point is, these structures and enclosures, without the use of equipment and air conditioning and even fans, could be very comfortable. So the origination of such idea of obviously came from a survival of how one would need to or a survival instinct that one would need to live comfortably in the home without getting wet, without getting hot and bothered, and able to do all the activities needed at home. And excuse me. So we have this, we call it the traditional houses in my country, in Malaysia, as a good prototype for adaptability. However, because of the lack of material, the lack of timber material per se, and the fact that it's not conducive to the modern living of having certain things, or is in the perception of how modern living should be, it became sort of obsolete and not replicated after a certain time. And also that timber costs rise and is very expensive now, along with the lack of skills and knowledge for people to build in timber. Or not this lack of skills, maybe it's very expensive for someone to build in timber. And it's just the whole tradition is cut off in one point. But most importantly, people are not interested anymore to live in such houses. But can these new house forms that we have now have a similar principle in terms of being able to be self-sustaining and have the same thermal comfort as these timber houses? And some architects do apply that. Is that the end of it? Would the architects apply some of these principles? Would it then still be adaptable? So that is one of the things that, for houses, for example, you have limited access to visit houses, but what you can garner from in terms of the publication and what people talk about when they design houses, you can find out about how the architect is in collaboration with the owner or not. When it comes to public buildings and highly specialized buildings, such as transportation hubs or maybe not religious building, hospitals, yeah. Well, buildings, yeah, those are specialized buildings. One could imagine that the adaptability factor could be in how that building would grow or develop over time, in which there could be more patience being used, or that you could change it about in a way that you could renovate it so that it is expanded to accommodate to new users and new technologies, for example. I would wonder about how hospital design evolved over time. And being a user or someone who goes to hospital, quite often I have seen how a certain hospital that I go to change over time, and some of it is still the same at parts, and some of it has changed a lot. And it's basically trying to cope with the volume of people coming in. And the car parking is atrocious. Yeah, when it comes to car parking management, It is, in a way, I should say, at one point, very inaccessible, but they rectified it a bit, but still there are some things that could be improved. Now we've talked about hospitals and transportation hubs. There are certain building types, for example, schools and colleges, and some building types that are linear in form. It may also integrate accommodation and living quarters, and they could be flexible if the system is easily can adapt to it. Like you change if it's a living accommodation, obviously from non-living accommodation to living accommodation, the piping system could be exposed, or if it's not exposed, how are you going to have it run along the wall and the beams and so on? How are you going to integrate that? So such ideas did the architect who designed the basic building think about the possibility of it being changed to a accommodation for people, like hostel or budget hotel and so on. In the case of the Pullman Hotel, they did that. Renovated an office building. They couldn't sell the office building space, and then the hotel owner bought it and converted it into a hotel. And the rooms are odd sometimes, but other than that, what are the implications to this? Would it impede on accessibility or safety or usability of certain things? For example, toilets and bathrooms, or even the means of escape and the problems of egress, for example. This is something that one needs to find out if you want to do a study on this, obviously, whether the building has been able, that form that originally it was it able to adapt to function well as the new built, the new function that is to accommodate. So with that in mind, I would like to finish this session of trying to clarify what we're trying to talk about here when we talk about visualization and adaptability. When something is known, when it is something that is completed and you can use it, then you can visualize how you're going to change it. And this is a part of decision-making processes that anyone has to do with developing something would need to have. So in the first instance, how much of your agenda would you need to put into the basic form so that it is more adaptable? How much of your agenda is it, like 0% or 20%? You should not have your agenda or your stylization of it. Make it much more utilitarian and able to adapt. Make it much more modular. Maybe don't be so fanciful with the curves, for example. Hence, there's certain types of form that is more adaptable than other forms. So we all can get the idea now. And yeah, thank you very much for listening.